Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Processing Severance. Would like to thank all of you for joining our team once again. This is Processing Severance, the Aftershow podcast. My name is Rasha G, and I'm joined by two of my fellow Lumen team members, Mike M.
Hey guys, happy belated Valentine's to you and all your Attilas out there.
and Robert L.
Hey everybody, I was going to call you Hannah, but then I remembered your name's Rasha, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And thank you for remembering my name. And thank you both for being here today. All right, whether you're listening or watching us, as always, before we dive into the latest episode, we like to take a minute and acknowledge everyone who's written into us. So we'd like to give a shout out to Kyle G. A comment that you had was about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and that was the song that we were talking about, the relevance. I can't even speak today. And it's interesting what you brought up. You said about the song, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald leads to bodies being taken to the depths, 29 to be specific, that were never discovered. So thank you for that little nugget, that number there. This parallels the idea of the wreck that Gemma was in before. Two, she descended to the depths of the testing floor, likely to never be discovered by the world up ever again. And this is by the outside world. I think this also points to the possibility of Lumen using wrecks or car crashes to acquire the bodies they are using on the testing floor. And we know that Lumen is in the business of causing car accidents, the Lexington letters. Also, we could assume that the character whistling the song is fully aware of the going ons on the testing floor and whistles the song, knowing full well the parallels between the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald and the testing floor. So, Mike or Rob, who wants to take this one first? I know we were talking about this before we started recording, and I think, Mike, you had some insight on this one with the parallels.
I just want to call out Kyle G. That is brilliant. I didn't even think about any of this. The idea that we're talking about two different wrecks, Gemma's wreck, car wreck, so alleged car wreck, and the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald as well. Yeah, of course, that makes so much sense. And us potentially, when you think of a ship sinking, it goes down just the same way that somebody's going down on the testing floor. So literally I think the parallels there are so much stronger than I ever even knew or thought about. Yeah, it definitely makes sense that the guy that they send to OND to take everything to the testing floor would understand that relevance when no one else did, and would be singing that song as well. I think it definitely ties into the idea that I think that maybe they're trying to do something, with her body and maybe mines that they're potentially trying to, or chips that they're trying to port into other people's bodies. Really spot on observation. Very impressed by that. What did you guys think?
Oh, I thought this was brilliant.
Mhm.
I didn't even think of that connect before. I mean, I think in our last episode, we had talked about the relevance and the significance of the song and the person who's whistling to it. But I think, Kyle, you just took it to a whole new level as far as really kind of, dissecting the song and its meaning and the significance of it. So bravo, bravo.
Yeah, and I just wanted
Mhm.
to add that the link to Lumon maybe causing car crashes or using them to acquire uh, cannon fodder, severed people, is really interesting because we see later on we have a really good close-up look at some documents that are talking about people who were severed or not or no longer severed, and it says at the top duplicates removed. Duplicates removed? What does that mean? Are they duplicates of people? That could explain Gemma, Miss Casey. And then also we see one particular person. It says Doug Coleman Doug, car crash, fractured left hand, lawsuit. And then in handwriting, did the settlement lead to severance? So I think they are throwing little Easter eggs at us so that we can now start to understand that there's something very nefarious going on with the people of the township of Keir, who are then eventually in car crashes and then end up in the bottom floor. Uh, More, please. I want to know more.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I don't know why that scene too with the ashes in Mark's in Mark's home, right? That we finally are saying that whose ashes are those if they're not Gemma's? So it seems
Yeah.
like people are just getting, cremated and their ashes are kept and just being sent. I don't know. I'd be curious to know whose ashes those are, but how these bodies are being utilized. Also, a shout out to at GiaDA951. So in reintegration has been something that we've also been very curious about and kind of talking about on this show. Giada, I believe is the name. I could be wrong, so forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this. So reintegration is supposed to just blend the memories of the innies and outies, but Asal Ragabi is still testing her own experiment. Yes, which I see that, and has no clue about the real end result and didn't even define it as an exact science. I feel like Mark S is her little guinea pig. Good. I think this is very important. Could affect Mark somehow. While he'll be able to get access to his innie's memories, there might be other side effects that Ragabi didn't predict. It's Mark's brain after all. And since there's no exact science when it comes to the human brain, because of the way it works can be unpredictable, even more so when it's subjected to an insufficiently tested experiment after already being stimulated by the chip and creating two different personalities. Just saying. I think my comment to that is going to be is we are still also finding out more about this. I feel like Ragabi comes off confidently, but then there's something still in the back of her mind of like, I hope this works. Like, I got to test it out. Like, she's not fully showing him her insecurities, but I do think that there is that moment in the back of her head of like, I don't think she's 110% sure of what she's also getting into. Like, this is her kind of just also, toying around with the experiments. What do you guys think?
I
Mm.
agree. Reintegration in general has proven to be dangerous. I mean, we found that out with Petey, right? Like he was reintegrated and things didn't go so hot for him. There was even part of me that was half wondering, in just, my weird paranoid sort of way, if she's in cahoots at all with Helly or with Lumen in general, like a secret mole or spy or something like that, we don't know a whole lot about her, but it seems kind of fishy that as soon as she wants to flood the chip, Mark goes to eat. Helena just shows up, and then Mark's motivated to get the chip flooded. I mean, like again, I'm just being paranoid, perhaps, but the timing is pretty suspect that
And
Helena would
why
be.
Mark? Why
Yeah,
Mark?
yeah, exactly. Why Mark specifically? And she just showed up out of nowhere too when he was doing the blinker thing.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot going on with her that doesn't make me trust her immediately, but she is selling the idea that she doesn't like Severance to us, but it all could be an act. I don't know. She was a former Severed employee
Wow.
anyways, right? So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I never thought of everything on this show is intentional. And if we're having that scene coupled up with the scene in the Chinese restaurant with Helena looking at Mark kind of like a chicken drumstick that she wants to devour and then slowly gets into his head, I just feel like that is absolutely connected in some way. And maybe Regabi is a mole, or maybe it's all a big red herring. Because she did kind of have a feel. I had a feeling she knew what she was doing because she did say to Mark when he started glitching, "Oh, you can't move that fast." So she does know. She's probably witnessed Petey go through it. But I also sense that she is still trying to work things out. And then towards the end of the episode, when Mark's having that seizure, with Devon and Ragabi kind of standing over him, I was trying to work out what each of them were thinking, or the two of them, and I couldn't really figure it out too. So maybe this is all another mystery for us to uncover and resolve. But at the moment, I have a lot of questions about Ragabi now. We have to be suspicious of everything on this show.
Well, it's time to put on our detective hat. So I think that leads us perfectly into getting into episode 6. I want to thank again all of our viewers and subscribers, and thank you both for writing in to us and sharing your thoughts. And again, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment section on YouTube, or if you are listening to us on one of your favorite podcast platforms, go ahead and write into us, processingseverance@gmail.com. We do check all the emails and try to address them. And hey, make sure you're tuning into social media because guess what? we are now also addressing some of your questions and comments in video format. So we'll be giving a shout out to you on the platforms as well while we address your question and comment. All right, Team Lumen, it is time for episode 6. This one was titled Attila, was written by Aaron Wagner and directed by Uta Bresowitz. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Oh boy, this episode for me moved very fast. I felt like there were just cut, scene to scene, scene to scene. A lot was happening. I felt like, again, a lot more information being revealed to us. But I want to start off talking about the title, Attila. And there is a particular scene that even just the name Attila is mentioned by Fields in the scene of where Irv goes to have dinner with Fields and Bert, which I also thought was kind of had an awkward conversation. But let's talk about Attila. Attila the Hun is known for military conquest and his expansion on the Hun Empire. Attila is considered as a scourge of God, which I feel like could be referred to somewhere in Lumen's thinking as well of how they want to take over humans or control humans. And this is because he was considered unstoppable in his military feat. So I feel like there's some type of parallels there as like Lumen is the overarching God that is helping these people in their own cunning ways. I mean, I'm not for anybody who's religious and watching this, I'm not throwing out any innuendos or comments on any religious figures, but I'm talking about the overall arch of this bigger than life energy that's out there, right? That's kind of ruling over. So jump in, guys. What do you think Attila is? I mean, are we looking at a revolt coming up soon? Is there a downfall of Lumen? Is this an uprise of Lumen? What do we think?
I mean, it's there for a reason. And so, like, this is the way I've tried to unpack it in my foggy brain, and that is Attila the Hun, even if you have a really, really very light grasp on history, most people have heard of Attila the Hun in some way, shape, or form, even if you don't know who the person was. So obviously, he was a great general conqueror, kind of um, like in the Mongols or the Ottomans. This was the Hun Empire that's based in Eastern Europe. And so maybe, I was getting a vibe from the whole episode that he knows more than what he's letting out as a saying. And could he be the guy that is with Irv, who we know Irv is working with someone else because he was on that phone in the previous episode. So they're starting to put the pieces together that maybe this storyline between Bert, Irv, and now Fields, by the way, John Noble, amazing Australian actor. So glad to see him back on my TV. Thank you for casting him as Severance Gods. And so yeah, there's something going on there. That's got to be intentional, unless it's just a red herring. But I do like how they started off with Hun. Most people in relationships generally have weird nicknames for their other half. It just happens. And Hun is something that you would say to someone that you love or whatever. And then, of course, it becomes Attila. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of how my brain works in my relationship. But I found that very funny. But yeah, I feel like this is intentional. And I think we need to keep our eye on Bert.
I agree. When you think about the idea of Attila the Hun, and yeah, maybe it could be a red herring, could just be very cutesy couple names. I mean that could be a possibility, but at the same time, titling an episode on a cutesy title, a cutesy couple name, there has to be some significance there. And when we think about the idea of conquest and expansion, in a lot of ways, I think the leading theories about what Lumen is doing can be tied back to conquest and expansion too. I mean, like when you think about colonization, you're kicking out, basically a group of natives and taking over. What's to say that on a very symbolic level, that's sort of what you're doing with the severed process or something like that. You're kicking out whatever was in there and then replacing it with something else. So, yeah, I think maybe it's definitely symbolic, but how it relates to Bert specifically and Irv, um, that's interesting. Maybe I don't know. I think I'm just on this everybody's a mole train and nobody should be trusted, but maybe Bert's a mole. Who knows? But yeah.
But since we are on this scene, I do, before we move on to the next, topic, I do want to bring up I think there is something more pivotal to this because you you see them having the reference of Attila. Like Phil specifically asks Irving, do you know what Attila or who Attila is, right? So we don't necessarily always see that in all the episodes. And I thought that that was very interesting to me that he specifically refers to Attila, never gets into the conversation fully though, but does refer to Attila. And it kind of felt interesting to me too, because I felt like, was he trying to just test Irving as when it comes to his intelligence or who he is? I mean, you've gone to dinner to somebody's house, right? You always want to feel welcoming and warm. That entire dynamic of the conversation there, it didn't necessarily feel like it was a warm welcome for Irving. I felt like there were some hesitancy and some resistance coming from Fields. And of course, we see that because he's like, bluntly asks them, did you both sleep together? So there's that going on in the back of his mind too. And it's a very uncomfortable dynamic as I watched it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt the same way. I felt like I couldn't quite work out what Fields' motivations were apart from him being obviously uncomfortable and suspicious. And yeah, I just don't know what to make of it. But I did feel very uncomfortable at that table, and I think that was the point,
You felt
perhaps.
uncomfortable too. Wait,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what about the years? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Because was it 20 years for Fields versus 12 years? That thing was for Bert. I don't, right? Because they started talking about the time difference of when they had been there. But then there was a thing of how long even Lumen has been around, which then wouldn't really match up to the timing.
And if you were to think about things happening 20 years ago, I it's hard to say because like the time frame it has always been ambiguous for this show, as is the location. But would severed ships have been as advanced as they are today 20 years ago? If not, then what would a severed process look like in the days that Bert first started working for Lumen or Field started working for Lumen? It makes you think a lot about the history of Lumen because there have been a legacy of CEOs dating all the way back to God knows when, before technology really advanced. So what was going on there, and were these two aware of it because they'd been with the company for so long? It makes you think those questions for sure.
And we've not really seen an unraveling of all of that. So I feel like is there going to be more to that? Let's also talk about how are we feeling about Helly and Gemma feeling being the same person? So I'm not still sold on the fact that they're the same person. I feel because we are going through this reintegration process with the chip, we are seeing a lot of back and forth happening, and that's causing some type of a thing. I don't want to say malfunction, but some type of process in his brain, right? So that's why he keeps seeing these flashes, and we see the flash of the face. So I'm not completely sold on the fact that they're the same person. How are you two feeling about this?
Yeah, I'm not sold on it either. I think it's too convenient and maybe even simplistic for them to just be the same person. But I do feel there is either a link between them that's happening underground, or it's simply just well, this is a subjective link that Mark has between Helly, who in as an innie he loves or wants to be with, and of course Gemma, who Mark Scout loves and wants to be with. And so it's this we talked about it, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the power of love and how love can kind of overcome, and it's an emotion that um, it's basically an emotion that can't be stopped or can't be explained. Maybe that is, and that could be a way for him out of this predicament that he's in. That's how I see it right now. I see it more as a metaphorical thing as opposed to a literal or physical thing. But I mean, I'm probably very wrong, but that's just how I see it right now.
Yeah, it could be a foreshadowing thing too. I mean, like if they're clearly doing something with Gemma, and if it's like a mind transfer or mind control thing, with Helena, then obviously the two personalities would sort of physically and mentally blend together. But to Rob's point, the narrative is starting to get a lot more jumbled now. We don't know what we're looking at, whether it's the outie world looking back in and remembering things from the any time, the any world, or the any world remembering things from the outie world. And as such, on just a very physical and literal level, yeah, it's very easy for Mark S and Mark Scout to think about Gemma and think about Helly at the same time, as two opposing romantic forces in his life that he's torn between. So maybe if we wanted to look at the literal definition, that's what we're going with. If we wanted to dig into it a little bit more, it could just be a foreshadowing thing. But yeah.
You bring up an
Mm.
interesting point, Mike, because I also thought that the dynamics, the more we're seeing Mark, I feel like we are starting to see a lot more between the innie and the outie. And there could be some confusion at moments, right? Like I think in earlier episodes, there definitely was that clarity of when you knew somebody was in an innie and an outie. But now with this entire process with Mark and seeing a lot of the flashes and what he's going through, and then you get into these conversations with Devin, I don't know. I feel like the lines are getting blurred a little bit. So it's like and then him also, let's jump to that scene real quick at the diner, where they're having
Yeah.
Chinese food. I think that was a very important scene in this episode, right? Because you've got Helena showing up and having that interesting conversation as well, where she wants to take Mark home to meet her dad. We were talking earlier about, is she trying to get pregnant? From Mark? Is he supposed to be helping bring the next, heir to the kingdom for them? And that's why he's been the secret project too. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. But even there too, like he's kind of surprised to see her, right? But then there is also recognized. I don't know. I felt like there's a moment where he does know there's a difference between Helena and Helly.
Yeah. What does he know? I was trying really hard to figure out, is he completely in the loop? Does he still not really understand what's going on? I think it was more that he knew there was something off. He knew who she was, I think, but was making out like he didn't. And then eventually he started to realize, but why did she call Gemma Hannah?
Yes.
No idea.
Yeah.
Why does she seem so keen or interested in getting him to meet with her father? And then when he starts glitching and realizes he needs to get out of there and he runs out, the restaurant's called Zufu, and I looked it up. Zufu it says Chinese, so I don't know if this is Mandarin, Cantonese, Shanghainese, I have no idea. But in Chinese, Zufu means father's father or paternal grandfather.
Oh, look
Mm.
at you, Rob. Wow.
Nice
We need
find.
And
to put you on the writers team.
yeah, baby. And did you notice that Zufu only FU was illuminated? So it's like the paternal grandfather is saying FU to someone. And is that telegraphing something? Are we supposed to think that is he related to the Egan family somehow? Or I don't know, but why paternal grandfather? That's intentional. They did not do that just for fun. Well, maybe they did just to screw with us.
No, you know what? Everything on this show was intentional. From the colors to the verbiage, to, the script writing to even things that we see in their homes and the office. Everything is so there definitely is, I think, a strong intention behind that. Mike, you were about to say something before I jumped in there.
No. I first off, I think that that's a brilliant analysis, Robert. When you think about where they are, and whether or not this entire location may or may not be controlled by Lumen, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for Lumen to set up a Chinese restaurant and then call it what they want, and Zufu being a tribute to Cure, maybe, I mean, maybe that's definitely something. It really strikes me as weird that Helly would want Mark to meet Jamie. I mean, it's odd. Jamie himself is just odd, with his old colloquial speech and everything like that. It does make me wonder if they're just looking for successors to the Egan throne, and Mark is a candidate for that. whether internally, mentally, like, from a brain standpoint or body swap standpoint, or physically in terms of siring a baby that could be the next CEO of Lumen after Helena. It's who knows how long this dynasty has gone on for, and how long each of these different members of the family have been CEOs. But it definitely feels like they're fishing for Mark. Calling Gemma Hannah is almost like it's really a dig, almost like, her telling him that, oh, she's not important or something like that, or maybe trying to sway him into, I don't know, something with her, a romantic relationship of some sort. Clearly she's already slept with him consciously. She was conscious about that. So I don't know. I think she's definitely got some sort of eyes, romantic, sexual, or otherwise, on Mark. And this is all a way of really disarming him and trying to manipulate him into doing something.
And this also could be another way of her still maintaining power over
Hmm.
Lumen Industries as her father's aging. And it's like, who does the power go to next? Who's going to be leading this? And I mean, we don't know the inside story, but maybe she needs to have a male figure. So maybe Mark is that person that needs to be there to contribute to that. When I think of some of even just the paternal part that we're mentioning, it just still seems the words control and power always come to mind for me when it comes to Lumen, right? And to the Egan and all this. So I just feel like somewhere in the back, this is all still looming. And there's still that thing of we don't really care about people, right? We are on this mission here at Lumen, and it doesn't really, the innies and the outies are serving a purpose. So at the end of the day, there is less on the human value versus what can we get out of them? What are these guinea pigs going to provide for us as we become this next cutting edge technological or whatever the company is, right? Because apparently, even with Cold Harbor, they're on to something that's going to put them on a whole different scale. We've already gotten that point in. Oh, medical, excuse me, not technical, medical, right? So they're creating something so big that is going to blow everyone away. I'm going to jump to, of course, one of our fun characters, Mr. Dillon. Dylan has been so interesting to me, right? In season six, this the way we see him just coming into him on his own self and seeing a lot more of him and how he's standing up and really voicing who he is. I thought it was fun to see Dylan and his wife, his Audi wife, meet again. We see the scene of where they kiss, but then she lies to him, to the Audi Dylan, about, and this I think kind of ties into our previous episode of the show where we were talking about the wife liking the innie version of Dylan more than the actual husband. We saw the two scenes of when she met him versus how he was at home handling the kids, and she's kind of babysitting and all. And I think the interaction between them two in this episode, I mean, I don't feel like it really unraveled anything major. I think it was more of a great observation, right? To see again the whole innie outie dynamics and what these people are dealing with in their two separate lives and how it's impacting their partners.
Yeah. I mean, definitely that connection and that perk of getting to see her is, motivating him to do things. We didn't know why he didn't take the instructions from the hang in there poster last time. Now we do. He doesn't want to get in trouble because he wants to continue being able to see his
That's
wife,
right. Yes, we
Yeah.
saw that in this episode.
Yeah. So I think he's definitely conflicted. He knows Lumen is evil, but he's getting lost in the perks of it all. The love that he's getting from his wife that he's never felt before. It's very interesting as well that she's kind of into that. And it's almost like a fantasy for her as well, from an escape from her actual life with his Audi and their kids. Hence why she kind of like lies to him that they didn't move forward. They had to cancel the meet and greet, even though that's not true. So I think there's definitely something going on there. It might also have, she might also become a proponent for, like like a slow bullet, a proponent for the severed program if it means she gets to keep Dylan's innie and that relationship thereof. I think that there's just going to be more for her character, similar to some of the other outies that we've seen, around this area. So yeah. Robert, what about you? What do you think?
I love that. I think that's spot on. To be completely honest with you both and everyone watching, I'm still really confused and not sure about what this particular storyline is supposed to be adding to the whole structure of the show. But I will say this, that and so by the way, I'm still working on in my own head, what does this all mean, except for just giving us an insight into how the innie and outie operates with the partner of the outie. But if you look at Severance as an example of how a lot of really, really interesting TV shows and movies these days like to deploy or employ neo-expressionism to, but by that I mean they build the world around these characters through symbolism, and they which externally expresses the characters' psychological states and perceptions by distorting reality or distorting what we're seeing on the screen, the spaces they inhabit. And in Severance, we see a lot of this through the corridors and the inner workings of Lumon, which could be like the inner workings of someone's brain. It could be the I'm just trying to think of something else, like the use of certain color schemes and the use of duality. We see a lot of, like, for example, there's a shot in the beginning of the episode with Helly and Dylan and Mark S inside, and they're talking, and then they're completely reflected on another wall next to them. So you see six people as opposed to three. When Dylan is in the room with his wife, beautifully get played once again by two-time Emmy winner Merritt Weaver, there's these screens, and sometimes Merritt Weaver's character comes up twice, so there's two faces, and sometimes there's six of her, and I just every it feels like in almost every scene I'm seeing an example of duality. I'm seeing an example of the inner workings of people's minds. And that's how I'm reading it right now. Really, really on not on a literal level, but more on a metaphorical level. And that's probably because I need to get out more. But that's where I'm at right now.
But that's an interesting point too, Rob, is that when you think about that duality, you think about also perhaps us as human beings in this world that we live in, right? And the duality that we serve, like the people who, so we, the three of us work in a creative field, but there are many people across the world who work in a corporate, they have a corporate lifestyle. And you think about what their life is of when they're at home, but then what it is when they walk into these corporates and who they are then as human beings, as far as who and what they represent when they work for these people, when they're in these buildings, and then how that impacts who they are when they leave those buildings. I don't know. That's what this show has really made me think about too, is
That's
like
fascinating.
who people are, right? When they're at work and dealing with this arena, and then how that's impacting them in the outside world. So you've got, again, the inner and the outer person
Yeah.
existing just with
I
all
think
of us.
Russia, that's key. Like that is key to understanding the show from the very beginning. Yes, of course, we're going to go down all these avenues of mythology and of course the characters' storylines, and we're going to get really deep, and we're going to and it's going to be amazing. But at a very macro level, this show is about corporate America, corporate life, and how you are in so many ways. Um, you have this duality. When I'm in the office, I am not the same as I am when I'm at home with my kids and wife and or with my extended family and friends. It's just not. It's just the way we are. And when I first started watching this show, I thought, oh, this is going to be a really interesting dynamic, and it's going to be a way in which this show can comment on corporatization of someone's life and how much better it would be if you could be severed. Sounds amazing. And of course, as we start going down all these rabbit holes, we realize that this is way more nefarious than we ever thought. And now we have all these questions, and now we're picking apart things that we see on the screen because we're
Right.
desperate for answers. But I mean that's all part of the fun. So this show's got a lot of levels that we are working on.
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to add real quick too, though, it comes from Dan, right? Dan Erickson, because he was working a corporate job that he didn't want to be at. So a lot of this was happening and kind of coming together as he was at that job and he knew he wanted to do something else and he started writing this. So I feel like there's probably a lot of nuggets. Um, let's talk about babies. So there's something in the intro where I think we saw a little bit of babies and we clearly know that Helly wants to have sex with Mark, and we see them build their fake tent at work, which is totally against corporate rules as well, I'm sure. And so then it's like, well, is Helly now trying to get pregnant by Mark? And what's that tie-in? And then that goes back to again Helena, right? Wanting to take Mark to go home to meet her dad, which she hasn't ever done before. And so there's definitely something around, I don't know, babies and babies contributing to something.
Wouldn't it be
Ah,
crazy if Helly's innie, after sleeping with Mark, gets pregnant to the surprise of Helena's outie? I mean, she'll be like, when did this happen? I mean, what is that even like, right? That'd be so
ah.
odd. Yeah. Sorry,
Intense.
just
No, but
ruminating
Yeah,
on
Helena,
that.
that's
wait, Helena knows she slept with Mark, right? Because she was in the tent.
No, Helly knows that Helena slept with Mark, but Helena doesn't know that any Helly
Oh,
slept with
yes,
Mark in
yes,
this
yes, yeah,
episode, right?
yeah, yes.
well
Um,
then. What if well, now they've both done the deed with Mark in some way, shape, or form. What if she does, as a human being, fall pregnant? The question will be, is it the outie or the innie that impregnated her? That's where I was headed when I started seeing them having sex in the under the desk. I was like, how are they going to know? How are they going to know who the dad is?
yeah,
Hell,
That
it,
is crazy. So there's definitely a tie into babies then, right? We see something happening
yeah,
with babies down
I
the
think
line.
so.
I mean, first we had seen the goats, now the babies, and there's definitely both of these women are after Mark for some reason. They
yeah.
definitely anything else? I know there's one more thing that was coming to my mind, and that's the huge hole in Mark's head. But is there anything else that stood out to the both of you that felt was like a really key moment in this episode?
Milchick, and Miss Wong,
I don't know why I
to a
just
degree.
did this, by the way. I'm not Italian. Sorry.
Well, I know. I was looking. I was like, are we
Did it for
related?
Ross.
Because I do this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, Milchick kind of, ruminating about the nature of childish behavior, criticizing himself for that, but then also coming down Miss Wong about that too. I mean, it reemphasizes everything that we've talked about regarding how they treat the severed employees, being children and everything like that. And he's meant to be quote unquote the adult because he's the manager, and he's taking it pretty hard on himself, pretending that he's a child, it's again, the disconnect between how a lot of these managers and the board and everything see the severed employees as children, and the dichotomy between those types of people and the upper management types of people, and all of that. So yeah, it's really interesting. If you're on the Miss Huang theory, she might be like Mark's kid with Gemma kind of theory. Without Mark knowing that that's his kid, either the innie or the outie, then there's another tie to babies, by the way. Just
Yes.
tossing that in there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean this idea of children is definitely a recurring motif, and the mentality thereof, and why that's kind of perceived as more of a negative thing in Lumen's culture. This is something I took away
Mm.
from the
And
Milchick.
I'm glad you brought up Milchek because, it's interesting. He is a very eloquent speaker. So it's almost like the skill set that he has and the talent he has is being dumbed down, right? Like he's asked to speak in a more simple way. So you see him practicing the words and revising those sentences to, okay, no, this way, this way, this way. And that again goes back to how you're saying you've got this managerial leads and people are looking over you. And even when you know you're good at what you do or you're expected to shine, you're still having to dumb down to the system. And so that,
Oh, that's spot on. I love that. I was wondering what was going on there because he's very upset about his performance review. And then he gets the paper clips because we know the paper clips were a big
oh my
problem for Mr. Drummond.
gosh.
And then he looks at the second page, the first page about how he uses big words. And then, yeah, the dumbing, it's the dumbing down of that middle manager. And it's the reining a middle manager in. You're a great manager, you're really good with people, but we need you to toe the company line. And so you need to do this. And that is very constraining and suffocating, I guess. Having been a middle manager myself, I know exactly how that feels, of course. But with Milchick, why does he go to the mirror and then that pep talk starts with that he needs to eradicate from his essence childish folly, and it ends with him just repeating the word grow, grow, grow. What the hell does that mean? I have no idea.
I feel like the mirror was a reflection for him, and it was a way for him to practice. It's like, how can I sit? So instead of just not looking into a mirror, just revising it, I think maybe him looking at his own self on what would be the best way for him to deliver it. Yeah, the grow thing, I'm still trying to kind of dissect too. Like, what did that mean to Milchek? And what is
Yeah.
that supposed to, maybe he's helping people grow in a different way. Like that's the intention over there. I don't know. I don't know that.
I don't know, but there's the duality again. There was two milkchicks in that room, one in the mirror and one not in the mirror, and they were having a conversation about growth. And so I have to try to read into that somehow. And my mind went straight to, does that have any relevance at all to the people on the testing floor and something that needs to grow? I don't know, but I'm
Probably.
sure we will find out.
But the
It's
duality
interesting.
there too is, who am I supposed to be and who am I being? That's what comes to my mind too.
Yeah,
Reflection
yeah.
mirror.
And it's the first time we've really seen the idea of duality with a character like Milchik, because traditionally this is not a character that's like severed. There's no two parts to him like there is with everyone else. He's actually a whole person. So this is the one time that he's kind of at a crossroads with himself and arguing with himself in the mirror. So I think that's pretty interesting that the board meeting just broke him down that way, you know? So maybe there's more to this that we're not aware of or privy to, but maybe there's a more literal duality going on there that that might be revealed later on, you know?
Well,
Just
I also
theorizing.
think he's hurt, right? And
Hmm.
this is the first time we actually, you see this figure who's been such an authoritative figure through all these episodes and knows what he's doing, knows what his responsibilities are. He's the leader as far as what we're seeing, right? He's the guy in charge. And this is I mean, aside from when he received the paintings and the conversations around that, but he's really, I don't know, I felt like there was this part of him that was hurt, maybe disappointed, but also hurt because he's trying to do the best he can and he wanted this position and he wants to shine at it, and already in the first review he's being torn down. And it kind of discourages you in a way, right? Because here you are thinking you're running the ship, you're doing amazing, and then your work is not really being celebrated in the way that you thought it might be. And in fact, you're sitting here being picked on, and now you're having to change who you're supposed to be. I don't think that's still going to lend him to be more of a favorite with the severed employees and like kind of like having more empathy for them. I still think he's going to be in that position of, I am managing, I'm in a more powerful position, I need to run the ship here. But I think seeing a little bit of this human side also softened him for me in watching this.
Mm, yeah. Look, all I can say is I know this for a fact. I want to see Tremel Tillman nominated at the Emmys later this year
Yes.
because
Oh, yes.
he's just hitting it out of the park. Every
He
episode, I'm just
Yeah.
deserves
like,
that.
wow,
Yes.
he's so good.
It's funny because Milchik is probably one of the more complex characters this to come from this season. He's very much at a battle, an internal battle, but also a battle with Lumen because as you mentioned, Russia, I mean, like it feels like they've betrayed him multiple times already. You know, the paintings, as much of a gesture of a reward as that might appear to Lumen, it was a
No,
bit
it was
condescending.
condescending.
Yeah, it
It
was
was condescending in
condescending
a
and
way.
completely insulting to him. And then sending Miss Wong to spy on him, and then just getting broken down by the board. he's actually one of the few characters that's trying to kind of do right by the innies, which is really interesting. I mean, he's not approaching it in the right way. I mean, he's approaching it in a very corporate way, but he's actually emphasized several times he's not Miss Cobell. He's trying to be fair, all of this stuff. And for that effort, he's just getting torn down by the company and by the innies. So he's definitely, the most conflicted character I think this season that we've seen so far. So, yeah, I agree 100%, Rob. He needs to be nominated for an Emmy. What a fantastic performance he's done this
He's been
season.
shining through and
Mhm.
through. All right,
Mhm.
highlight the way the show ends. I had a very challenging time watching her, Ragabi, run that scalpel or whatever she's cutting his head with. I'm like, yo, did you give him some anesthesia? I didn't see that part. Did I miss it? Um, that was intense,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
just actually experience that scene and then to wonder where is this going to lead us to? And you see all these fast moving things, and then Devin shows up and he just kind of walks away. He doesn't even have anything to cover himself or whatever. And then we see him falling over at the end as he bends to get that glass of water. Oh, and then we see Ragabi run out, right? And Devin now is seeing her for the first time. Am I saying her name right?
For Gabi? Yeah.
Regabi?
Bobby,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and then we see Devin running out. So, and I was like, wait, episode 7. Wait, Mark. Okay, we know Mark S is not going to die. Mark Scout is not going to die, but I think the whole dynamics of just even experiencing this cut happening in his brain and then relating that to actually what we're seeing in the animated open of the show is very fascinating.
Well, I just was really grossed out at first, and just kept thinking, bro, how are you walking around with this huge hole in your head? Um, and but we just go with it. This is where the show then goes off into a whole other realm of sci-fi, and it's cool, but I was just like, this is not easy to watch. I don't know, just seeing the needle going into the big hole and then flooding the little thing inside of him, and then he glitches and has a seizure. Not easy to watch. I have no idea what to make of it though, so I am completely useless to that conversation.
Well, question for you guys. I mean, like maybe they explained it and I didn't understand it or went over my head, but does anyone know what flooding the ship really means or entails? Like, what does that
No,
do? We didn't get an explanation for that, right?
No,
no.
we haven't, I think, seen too much about that. I'm wondering if flooding the chip means, is it flooding it with too much info, right? Like
Mm,
sourcing everything in there that needs to be in there for whatever needs to happen. Could it be that? I don't know. Yeah,
Maybe.
this whole thing left a lot more questions for me, so I'm showing up today with actually a question to these questions because I don't even know. That scene was so powerful, but I didn't know what to really make of it. And of course, I think we'll probably see more happening in episode 7 around that, because we've only got 4 more episodes left of season
I
2.
know.
And
God,
far more
already.
questions than when we started.
Yeah, this is like
Yeah.
unraveling my own brain, man.
I know. But just remember, like in season one, we were getting quite a lot of really interesting stuff. And then at the end of the season, we really got hit over the head with a big reveal. And we saw that amazing sequence of the Audis of becoming innies for a little while. I imagine that at the end of season two, and by the way, I think the episode's called Cold Harbor. I was doing some digging on the web, and it looks like all the episode names have been released.
Okay.
Something big is going to happen, and then we're going to be stuck with maybe 3 years of question marks like
Oh,
last
geez,
time.
I hope not, man. That was a long, long break.
Yeah. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt because of the strikes and a lot of the other stuff that kind of conflicted with production and shooting and writing. But I think with those out of the way, I'm hoping for a lot faster of a turnaround time so that we can get answers in less than 3 years.
All right. Well, we're going to be back with more answers next week before we close out here. As of episode 6, who's one of your favorite characters at this time?
That's
Milchek for me.
interesting.
Mhm.
Milchek? Really? How
Milchek for
come?
me. Again, I think that there's just he's starting to question and break down Lumen in all of its ways. And I think there's a battle going on within him that I again it's been raging since that first episode, I think, this season, and it just continued to get bigger and bigger. So I want to see what he ends up doing by the end of this season. I think he might end up becoming an unlikely ally. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I do love Milchek, and I've at first I thought Milchek was just a personification of the terrible middle managers that we've all dealt with in our lives. I think there's more to him. I think you are so right, Mike, that he is the linchpin, perhaps maybe someone who might turn on the company. And I've always had in the back of my mind, and I want to park this for now and maybe revisit in a few weeks. But I feel like there are more than one Milchek. I just don't know. I have a feeling that something's going on with Milchek, and there could be more than one of him.
Really?
Um, so we
Mm.
need to yeah, I've been working on that theory. I might have to come back to you. But my favorite character right now, there's so many, I love them all, is Miss Wang because she's just like a little baby, and yet, pardon the pun, and yet she knows how to do a manual blood pressure test like a nurse very quickly. Like, there's no way that I would be able to do that, and anyone really. But she was rich. She's very, and she can play the theremin, and she still gets annoyed when she doesn't get to play her musical instrument that she's been practicing. So she's still a child, and yet has the knowledge and aptitude of an adult. And that fascinates me. I want to see more of it. It's just so crazy that a show would put someone like her, this child, in this role. It's bizarre and I love it. But I must say one more thing. I need to know, where the hell is Patricia Arquette?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I need
I
more.
Where's Cobell?
What's happening with Cobalt?
I
Hopefully, we'll see
she's
more of her.
coming back. She hasn't gone because she was wait, going back to Miss Wong real quick. And we have to find out, who is she? Is she
Yeah.
somebody's kid, or was she created in the lab there? What is the story on her?
Yeah.
Um, Patricia's coming back because, or she has to, because she was the one who was heading up Cold Harbor. And we know that from
Mm.
the previous episodes. And I don't know, just from an artistic point of view, I think she's the EP on some of these episodes too. So I can't imagine
Yeah.
her just being dropped out of the show. She was such a pivotal part and leader. So I do think we'll be seeing her come back. My favorite right now, I'm loving learning more about him, is Dylan. I think the
Mm.
exploration of his innie and outie has shown several different personality components, and it's been fun to see him standing up in his power, seeing how he shows up, and then him even learning more about himself, of who this character is and what is he really contributing to this team. And is he even a team player? Or is Dylan just kind of a roaming soul on his own in this entire thing? And I'm loving seeing the dynamics between him and his wife, and where that's going to take them when it comes to the innie world and the outie world, since we're seeing her kind of more connected, and feeling that love on the innie. So thank you once again to my brilliant team, Mike
Thanks,
and Ross.
guys.
And I want to thank everybody else who is either watching or listening. Thank you for joining us on Processing Severance, the Aftershow podcast. Again, we love hearing from you. We love talking to you all, love just, engaging. So continue with those emails at processingseverance@gmail.com. Continue with the comments and listen, share with your family and friends. We are spreading the word on this podcast. You know that we are so invested and excited about this, and we want to share it with all of you as well. So thanks again for joining us, and keep your minds going, but stay sane. We'll see you for the next one.